Hello and welcome. I want to get straight into the quote that inspired today's video. And the quote is, "Wellness culture suggests that you can do everything naturally. But the problem is, if you have sex without contraception, the natural thing is to get pregnant." Now, this quote was said by Dr. Janet Barter, who is the president of the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Healthcare. This was so concerning for us when we saw this because not only is this a medical doctor who said this is also someone who is in a position of power and influence over women. And this statement is factually incorrect. This statement is so similar to the statement that all of us grew up hearing. If you have sex, you will get pregnant. This kind of message led us all to believe that you will get pregnant every single day of your cycle. As soon as a male basically touches you, you're going to get pregnant. Therefore, you have to do everything and more to try to prevent pregnancy should you dare have sex at any point. And again, this is factually incorrect. This is also why so many women feel lied to when they discover the awareness of their fertility, which is fertility awareness, when they discover how their body works. So many of us, I had this rage of, I feel lied to. I feel like the people who are the so-called experts of biology, of physiology, of women's bodies, why didn't they tell me this basic information about my body? So what's frustrating about this and this quote that I just read out is that, one, either we have somebody who is a medical doctor and someone in a position of power over women's reproductive health who doesn't know how pregnancy does or doesn't happen, like literally doesn't understand the physiological process of pregnancy, or is aware, but then feels like many other people, I guess, feel that women can't be trusted with the knowledge of their body. Women can't be empowered with information about their body. We should protect them from, themselves and not give them the full information to make important decisions about their body. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the big question: does it actually work to naturally prevent pregnancy through natural ways? Can you prevent pregnancy without hormonal birth control and without the IUD? Or is this some kind of like woohoo health wellness cult being pushed on everybody? But no, it actually doesn't really work. It's just like a strange little fad that everybody's going through. Spoiler alert, it works. And we're going to talk about it in this video, but we're going to give you the facts that I guess other people are afraid to give women about their bodies, things that I believe they should know to make an empowered decision about how they do want to go about preventing or getting pregnant. And with that all being said, I'm just going to do a quick introduction, then we're going to get into the meat of all of this. I just want to welcome you here again to our wellness discussions. I'm joined by my amazing co-creators, Jacqui and Sam. Together, we created a course that is for women, and it is about coming home to yourself and blocking out the noise of everybody else telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing with our bodies and pretending like they all know better that what is good for our bodies. So our course is structured in 3 parts. The first part is Sam's part. It is all about checking in with your approach to your femininity and the nervous system and the emotional things, and really kind of getting back to the voice that's inside of you that most of us have lost along the way because so many people are telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing. The next part is my part, why I'm so passionate about this. It is all about your cycle, the reproductive health of women, how to know when you're fertile, and how to know what your cycle is telling you, and so much more. And then we have Jacqui's part. Jacqui is our nutrition expert. So there's so much information in there that can aid us when we take the messages from our body, or what do we want to change to thrive. And then, of course, we have loads of bonus content around lifestyle and other factors, but our course is linked down below. So we're so excited to share that with you, and that course inspired these discussions because we want to have so much more that we want to talk about. And with that being said, let's talk about those things. So as a way to start talking about this topic, let's talk about what this is not. Because one of the things that really irritates me when we start talking about avoiding pregnancy naturally is people camp all sorts of things under fertility awareness. And it's not all the same, and not all of them are equally effective at preventing pregnancy. So I'm going to hand it to the crowd. What is one of the things that we are not talking about when we talk about avoiding pregnancy naturally?
Avoiding pregnancy naturally is not using a fertility app to predict your ovulation and only avoiding sex during the predicted fertile window that an app is telling you. That is not the fertility awareness method.
When you hear somebody say, "Oh yeah, I track my cycle, I log my period in an app," that is not fertility awareness. Apps are only beneficial if you are using them as a way to record your own observations about your body. An app cannot accurately predict your ovulation ahead of time, because you need to know ahead of time in order to avoid pregnancy if you want to. But yeah.
The fertility awareness method is not just the assumption that on day 14 you're ovulating. I think it can be really misleading for women to just kind of create these tracked days or blocked weeks. Specifically also kind of linked to that app as well, where we just go, okay, on this day this is happening, and on this day this is happening. On every single day of the month it has kind of a block day. That's not how it works at all. And it's both the app and that kind of assumption method it's a disassociation from the body. It's going into the mind and kind of putting something either on paper or in a calendar on an app. And it's not allowing you to connect to the innate intelligence, messaging, and symptoms that the body is often giving us. That is our ultimate clues to where we're at in our cycle.
It's so valuable. And I have such a beautiful story to share around this. Somebody messaged me. She was trying to conceive. And lots of people trying to conceive, they use those ovulation tests. And that little pamphlet is always like, hey, count the days. And then on this day, start taking it. And she's coming in so frustrated because I'm not getting this positive LH spike and this and this. And I was like, well, are you seeing cervical fluid? And then she's like, not, when it's telling me, but I see it. And I was like, fantastic. Leave those expensive ovulation tests until you see cervical fluid. Once you see it, start taking them. And then she was like, no, but my gynae said, if I don't ovulate by day 22 of my cycle, then I'm not going to ovulate and I can't get pregnant. And I was like, no, just do it. Let's see what happens, and then she did. She waited until she saw cervical fluid, which was after day 22 of her cycle. She took the ovulation test. She got the positive. She had sex, and her baby just turned 2. So for me, that's an amazing success story that it had. She got pregnant on that first cycle. And it was just why are we so hell-bent on counting days? But yeah, just an assumption of when somebody typically ovulates is also not the fertility awareness method.
The fertility awareness method is not just tracking your cycle, but also taking active steps to avoid pregnancy during your fertile window. And it's important to note that if you use another form of contraceptive during that fertile window, the risk of pregnancy is the risk of that form of contraceptive. So if you choose to use a condom during that fertile window, you still have the risks associated with using a condom. So you need to decide your risk tolerance during your fertile window and either abstain or use another form of contraceptive, understanding the risk of that contraceptive. But you do need to actively take steps to avoid falling pregnant in your fertile window.
I think that's such an important point, and I just want to highlight something there is the word active. And there's something about taking radical responsibility as a woman over your cycle and over your body that the FAM method does offer us, and we'll go into that. But just that idea of awareness is all good and well, but if you're not actually taking aligned action that serves that awareness of the intention of what you want out of each month, then it's pointless. And having that need to take action, whether it's in your fertile window or whatever you kind of tracking within your cycle or trying to move towards, it feels really empowering as a woman when you're able to do that.
And I think that there's a lot that goes into and the gift that comes out of fertility awareness and the decision of what you're going to do with that information. Because before, a lot of our approaches is to control our cycle. I mean, hormonal contraceptives are that. You can control when you get your period. If you get any kind of bleed, it's called a period. It's not really a period. And I think with the fertility awareness, there's a lot of almost, I want to say, surrender that needs to happen to kind of see how it's going to unfold, because we can predict when we're going to be fertile, but then we have to wait for that confirmation afterwards. And in our modern society of needing to know everything right now, there's a bit of a beauty in allowing your body to give you the feedback it needs to give you, and to listen to that information and decide what you are going to do with it. Because every other method of contraceptive is the failure of that contraceptive is out of your hands, essentially, unless it's human error in how you're taking it. But if you say, for example, the pill is 99% effective, so there's a failure rate typically of around 0.3% to 0.6%, that happens without you doing anything. That's just sort of like the failure of the pill. Where with the fertility awareness, it is 100% effective, depending on your risk and how you choose to use it and what you and your partner are comfortable with when you embark on, okay, I know when I'm fertile. So first of all, the effectiveness is how good is your awareness of your body and your fertility signs? And then two, what do I do with this information and what risks are we willing to take? We still want to maybe do some stuff. So what are we going to do to prevent pregnancy in that time? But the beauty is that power is in your hands and you can decide.
And maybe just to clarify, you say it's 100% effective because you cannot physically fall pregnant outside of your fertile window. So if you can identify your fertile window correctly, avoid forms of sex that can result in pregnancy during that fertile window, and have sex outside of your fertile window, it is 100% effective. The fertility awareness method is 100% effective because it's not physically possible to fall pregnant outside of your fertile window. But as you're saying, it's the identification of that fertile window where there is room for error. But as we'll explain in the video, that fertile window, it is a defined period that can be identified given certain biological markers.
Okay, so given that some people think it's woohooey, which is so interesting because the people who typically call this woohooey are the people who are the so-called experts on the female reproductive system. But let's talk about the facts of why. Why can't you get pregnant during that time, or why does it work?
So one of the reasons that the fertility awareness method works is because we only ovulate once in a cycle. You cannot ovulate more than once. There is a possibility that during that ovulation, you might release more than one egg, but ovulation still happens once. So once affirm using your biofeedback that ovulation has occurred, it is not physically possible to get pregnant after that egg has died, because another egg is not going to come. There will not be another egg after that egg has been released until your next cycle.
And just to be clear, we need an egg for a baby. So if an egg is only being released once in a cycle, and like Jacqui said, multiple eggs can be released in that cycle. That is how twins happen. But they are released at more or less the same time, maybe within a few hours of each other, but it won't be different days. If you are ovulating more than once in your cycle, it means you probably have multiple reproductive parts, and you probably already know that you have a very different physiological bits compared to the average person. So everybody else with just the usual reproductive parts is only ovulating once in their cycle, and you're only releasing one, maybe two or three eggs, but during that one ovulation.
It's so crazy to me that most of us don't realize, well, until I was educated about this maybe 10 years ago at school, I thought I had no idea you could only get pregnant at one point in the month. It's like any day of the month, it was risky business, and it's so scientifically perfect in its creation. And I just don't know how anyone can look at it and say that it's woo-woo when it's biology, it's science, it's fact.
Yeah. And also this egg that is released, they only live about 12 to 24 hours. So if your egg is not fertilized in that 12 to 24 hour period of time, that egg is going to disintegrate, and then pregnancy is not possible for the remainder of that cycle. Now, I just quickly need to come in here. That does not mean that we can only get pregnant for 12 to 24 hours of our cycle. We can get pregnant for longer. And that is thanks to the amazing female function, which is cervical fluid. So cervical fluid is amazing. And again, this is so sad how as a teen, I was like, gross, what is this? Why is this coming out of my body? Like, why does it sometimes come and I don't have it all the time, etc., etc. And now I'm like, it's amazing. Anyway, for most of your cycle, your vaginal canal is incredibly acidic and it's a hostile environment to sperm. Sperm will die when it enters in there. But when you have cervical fluid, it becomes more alkaline, it becomes more welcoming, and your cervical fluid transforms sperm to be able to fertilize an egg. So the only times that sperm can survive inside the female body is if you have cervical fluid. And all women will know this. You do not have cervical fluid your entire cycle. We all know we have periods of cervical fluid and then we have periods of dry. And becoming aware of our fertility means taking note of when we have cervical fluid and when we don't have cervical fluid.
And the length of time that cervical fluid can keep sperm alive, that is in your fertile window. So cervical fluid can keep sperm alive for up to 5 days. And that's why your fertile window starts 5 days before ovulation, because if you have sex during that time, the sperm can stay alive waiting for that egg because it has the cervical mucus. Then when you ovulate and the egg is released, that egg can be fertilized. So that's why your fertile window is around 5 to 7 days.
I just find it so miraculous that the body literally creates like a little safe haven in your fertile window for the sperm to learn. Like it's so beautifully intelligent. It's amazing.
And outside of that fertile window, when there's no cervical fluid, the body's like, nope, it's acidic. Sperm dies within 2 hours in that acidic environment.
Yeah, it's really impressive what the body does and when we start to understand it, because every single cycle, your body is going to act like you maybe want to reproduce. And then once you've ovulated, it's going to act like you might be pregnant. So another thing that happens once the egg has been released and ovulation is over, your body creates a type of fluid that actually blocks your cervix. So not only is your vaginal canal becoming hostile to sperm not wanting to survive, it blocks it as a protection in case a baby starts to grow in your uterus. It doesn't want any bacteria getting in there or anything. So we typically call that your mucus plug. And you will hear people who are going into birth to say they lost their mucus plug because only if you're pregnant does it grow large enough for you to sort of substantially see it. But you do have a mucus plug every single cycle that plugs your cervix for your luteal phase, which is an infertile phase, where now your vaginal canal is hostile to sperm because there's no cervical fluid, and your cervix is blocked by mucus that doesn't want anything to get inside. So again, pregnancy is not possible. And somehow, if the sperm lived a little bit and got in, there's also no egg. So pregnancy not possible during your luteal phase. So with this information, this is why we call it fertility awareness method. It's not really like a method per se. It's having an awareness of your body and your fertility signs and what your body tells you. I'm fertile now. I'm not fertile now. And that's all there is to it. It's being aware of your fertile signs and not, and then deciding what do I want to do with that information, which is what we spoke about earlier. So it can be 100% effective, or you can decide, okay, well, I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk here and there. And around our fertile window, so Jacqui spoke of this, cervical fluid can keep sperm alive for up to 5 days. For some people, that may be less. It's probably unlikely that it's going to be more, but I mean, there may be the off chance that it can be more, but you'll know your body. So if there's cervical fluid, it can keep sperm alive. So you have to kind of decide in your follicular phase and really have that awareness of your body, like what kind of risk are you willing to take? So in the course, I cover this in detail. All of us have a different cervical fluid pattern. As we go from not fertile to fertile, we start to see the cervical fluid change. And some literature might say that all cervical fluid is fertile, but this is also not factually correct because it is still changing. And you can decide though, because it can change really quickly, like the morning and the afternoon, it may be different. So it may be risky to to do what you want to do. But again, this is a risk that you can decide if you're going to take it or not with this information from your body. So that's why when we talk about the effectiveness, or somebody Googles the effectiveness, and I think that the stat that's usually given is 99.4% effective, but that's usually because of typical use, like how people typically use it, rather than to say, well, it's 100% effective. And then depending on what couples decide to do within that frame and your awareness, that's where the sort of non-effectiveness percentage would ever come in. So just a reminder that if you are feeling like, oh no, but I don't know what my signs are, I don't know what to look out for, we do cover this in depth in our course. There are resources that I have linked down below if you want to get a taster of some more free content before you decide to dive into it. But I do think that if you're sort of serious about getting to know your fertility awareness, our course is a great option for that. One of the things that I've really found in my experience of being somebody who loudly and proudly talks about the fertility awareness left, right, and center whenever I get the opportunity is a lot of people will say to me things that I heard myself when I told people that I was using this as my way to avoid pregnancy. And some people are maybe like scared, or they're shamed, or they receive comments that are pretty unpleasant to receive. So I just want to cover those because I myself, I'm very, very confident in the fertility awareness method. I've used it for a really long time to avoid pregnancy, and I used it to conceive, and I was pregnant. I've been pregnant 5 times, and I either conceived the cycle I wanted to or the next cycle, and I did things like take like 1 cycle off in between. So that's like a really high rate of me being able to check whether it's actually working or not working. So I'm very confident in that. Yet I still heard people say, like when a doctor was asking me like, oh, but what kind of contraceptive are you using? And I was like, no, just my fertility awareness. And she's like, okay, so you don't mind getting pregnant then? This is not unique to me.
No. My granny told me that she'll see me soon when I'm pregnant.
So it does seem to me that this is what medical professionals are saying, as if they are debunking some kind of strange way of understanding what's going on with your body. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, and that quote that you started with, Common, comes from a Times article where they interviewed Dr. Botta, and the theme throughout the article is sort of this shunning this woo-woo wellness trend of going off birth control. And it's like you said, Sam, how can a medical professional be woo-wooing a phenomenon like we just discussed is scientifically plausible? It's not a woo-woo trend. It is a biological fact. It just gives a complete mistrust in the medical industry.
100%. And I think without getting to conspiracy theory about this, some of the modules in our course speak to the fact that there are certain pillars or structures in place in our society that are dismantling our power as women. And we have this as an exact example. Taking the pill is a form of outsourcing your power in so many ways. And there is a way in which the fertility awareness method forces you to insource. It forces you to look within yourself, to take responsibility, and to learn to trust your body. Now, on a deeper level, when women begin to trust their bodies, they begin to trust themselves, they begin to trust their worth, they begin to trust some of the things that they're told, and they're no longer just like, yes, sir, no, sir, kind of, they're empowered women. And what the world needs more than ever is women who are empowered, but more so than that, women who trust themselves. And this is why I get so passionate about this specifically with my clients, is this is a doorway to so much more than just understanding your bodily cues. There's so much magic to be found in this, and it's very scientific and factual, but there is kind of a mystical, beautiful element to this as well.
And we shouldn't be trying to create this divide between, the medical approach and the wellness approach. Everyone should be concerned with women's health, women's wellness. We should be working together. And I think that if I was a gynecologist, I would lay out all contraceptive options to women, with the fertility awareness method being one of those options that we lay out and we present to women. So this idea that, the wellness influencers are causing people to get pregnant, it's like the wellness industry came about as a byproduct of people getting gaslighted in the medical industry. It's not like we have some other agenda. We are here because we found this way ourselves. We want to empower women on this journey. It's not like we trying to be part of some trend. This is genuinely empowering women.
Yeah, and I think most of us ended up with going the fertility awareness route simply from a pure frustration, or at least I know that I did, leaving a gynecologist's office feeling so frustrated at, for the millionth time, being told the only option is the pill, even though I asked like in that session I was asking the whole time, but like there's gotta be something else, like I don't want to take the pill. And the doctor was like, no, here's your prescription if you change your mind. And I left with a prescription that I threw away, and I was like Googling like, well, okay, what else can I do? Because I don't want to do this. And the person I'm asking advice for is not telling me that there are other options out there. And so that was one of the things that was disturbing for me in that article, is she said that women are fearful that doctors are going to tell them what to do, but doctors don't, and I'm not citing this like verbatim, it's just in the article there, but that doctors are not there to tell women what to do with their bodies. They're just there to give information. But realistically, that's not the experience that most women are having. Most women are having experiences where doctors are scaring them into believing that they can get pregnant so easily. But this is what really bugs me, is if you've ever tried to avoid pregnancy and then try to conceive and gone to the gynecologist, you may relate to what I'm about to share now. But the message changes significantly from when you're trying to avoid pregnancy to when you're trying to conceive. When you're trying to avoid pregnancy, a lot of people act like someone's going to look at you and you're going to get pregnant. Then you start trying to conceive, and the message changes to, oh, just relax, let it play out. And the stat that is given to women, and you can Google this stat, is that if you are perfectly healthy, you and your partner perfectly healthy, you time your sex perfectly, your chance of conception every single cycle is 25%. 25% if you get it perfect. So then the message is suddenly, don't worry, that's quite low. Just give it a couple of months. Now, I understand the risk is really big, pregnancy, birth, all those things. It's a really big thing. But you can see how somebody with expert knowledge can use different information to really pressure somebody into making decisions rather than giving them the information and then empowering them to make the best decision for their body. Is that they give information selectively in a way that kind of scares women. I know I was scared onto taking the pill. I was literally afraid that I was going to get pregnant, even though I'd been having sex before that and knew that I was successfully avoiding pregnancy. I was still like, oh, okay, no, someone wiser and more educated than me is saying I should do this, so therefore I should do it.
Yeah, and we've all three been using the fertility awareness method for years now. And we know many women, we help many women with the fertility awareness method. And yeah, if it was as risky as she lays out in this article, we would know a lot more pregnant people.
Yeah, okay, so let's answer that, because I often get, oh, but my friend so-and-so got pregnant doing this.
I think the only way you would get pregnant doing this is, I don't mean to sound rude, is you're not doing it correctly, because there is a certain science to this working. And if you don't follow the specific steps within the fertility awareness method, there's lots of room for error. But if you follow it to a T and you understand your body, I've been using it for 10 years. It's worked wonders for me. There hasn't been one slip up,
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like every friend so-and-so who I've spoken to who publicly shared that they had a pregnancy that was unplanned and that they were using some sort of natural way to avoid pregnancy, when you actually talk to them, you'll hear how they got pregnant. And it's not some fell out of the sky thing. It's usually just because people are shamed for unplanned pregnancy that nobody wants to announce, to say, you know what, I knew, but I did it anyway. Or, you know what, I just didn't feel like tracking that cycle. So we took a risk. We got caught up in the heat of the moment and we did the thing. So I think people are afraid of being shamed, so then they say, okay, no, but I was doing this other thing. But it's a little bit unfair to the fertility awareness method that people are blaming it, but we can understand why. So if friend so-and-so got pregnant and is willing to really share with you, obviously that's their personal information, how they got pregnant, you might discover that it was not as a result of the failure of the fertility awareness method.
Another misconception, which comes more from the medical side, is that it's too time consuming, too much effort. Women aren't going to want to follow this method. So I'm curious to hear what you have in response to that comment.
Yeah, this is a big one. I actually had a few friends tell me like, oh, no, I don't have the time to do what you do. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm just intense. So my version of doing it is very intense. Is why I read all the books and like made a course about it. The average person does not need to do that. It does not take very long. There's loads of ways to do it. Honestly, the longest part of it is recording the information so that you can look back on it. So I actually recently created a fertility awareness journal. There you go, because I don't like the use of apps, even though I don't like the use of apps, I do cover that in our course and how they can be beneficial to you, just so you know. So that's the important thing, is just because that's not my preference, is I would never dissuade women from using it, and I do give tips on how to use it. So if an app is the best way to record your information, by all means do so. It does not take long to learn. Look, I'm an advocate for our course. I think our course is awesome because it's condensed information. But if you're thinking, oh, this is like another thing I have to buy to learn to do, no, there are free ways you can do it. It might take a little bit longer because you might have to watch a bunch of YouTube videos and read some extra articles, maybe buy a book on it, where our course is a condensed version of it. But it really isn't that hard to learn once you get past people trying to sell you stuff. This is also a very irritating one for me, is a lot of people in the wellness industry as well gatekeep information. So we are not gatekeeping that with our course. Just so you know, link down below is another free video of mine where I describe a lot of stuff. And if you want more detail, by all means, I think do our course because there's a lot of value in it. But this is not some secret that only some people know. You do not need a fertility awareness, what do they call it, coach or whatever, in order to track your cycle. What you need to learn is, what are the fertile signs? What do they look for in my body? You need a way to record that information and then just do it. And you will see after 1 cycle, 2 cycles, it will become second nature. Once you've got the hang of it, it's so quick. It's shorter than taking a pill every day. It is shorter than needing to remember to refill your prescription and go to the pharmacy and buy a pack of pills. So it for sure takes less time than that. And even if it's got a slight learning curve in the beginning, it's worth knowing how your body works. It's so much more than just a way to avoid pregnancy. So the little bit of time you invest in knowing it is going to give you so much more than just knowing when you can and cannot get pregnant. Like, one of the benefits is you will know long before trying to conceive if there might be something that could pose a challenge on your conception journey. And this is a big thing because infertility is a real sadness. It's a real difficult challenge that couples face. And you would know, oh, wait, but I'm not ovulating every cycle. So this means when we try to conceive, we might struggle. And this is something that you will then be able to address long before you start trying to conceive. Whereas with the pill, you're not going to know. You're just going to have a doctor shame you and tell you there's no evidence that the pill impacts fertility. You can just go off and conceive, even though it's probably not great advice. But anyway, you won't know. And then you're struggling to conceive for a long period of time, and it's really heartbreaking. So there's so much benefit in learning this, even if it's got a slight learning curve, which I don't think is huge.
I would also just touch on the fact of, like, where do your priorities lie? You know, making sure that your actions align with your priorities. We live in a world of instant gratification. Everything is just a quick fix. And if you just take the time to learn about this and understand about this, it doesn't take that much time at all. It takes me 2 minutes in the morning to track my temp, to record what I need to record. And then it's just also being in communion and having a conversation with your body and understanding where your body's at. It's not this time-consuming thing that you have to do. It's just responsibility about your priorities and then aligning your actions to match that.
Similar to that, we also sometimes get comments about when it will and won't work. So one of the ones that I get quite often is it won't work when you're breastfeeding or postpartum. So I thought maybe Jacqui, you could comment on this, given that we've done this.
Okay, so when women are breastfeeding, usually the first few months they aren't ovulating, but your first ovulation will come before the first period. So that therein lies the trickiness. You don't obviously want to fall pregnant again on that very first ovulation, but your fertility signs will still be there. You will still be aware that there's starting to be a change in cervical mucus patterns, and being really in tune with your cervical mucus, and maybe even making use of the other fertility awareness method sign, which is your cervical position. That can also be another thing that can help in that time period before you get to your first period.
And just as evidence, Jacqui and I are both big on child spacing. Both of us use the fertility awareness method to avoid pregnancy after we had our children and through breastfeeding. So from my perspective, I was even able to tell that the first few times I had a bleed were anovulatory cycles. I knew that I wasn't ovulating, even though I was bleeding. So that was very interesting information for me, where we usually think, oh, okay, I've got my period back, I've got my cycle back, where I didn't get my cycle back until a few months after that. And again, I knew ovulation was coming before the time. So yes, it might be a slightly more tricky, so to speak, just because it's not as typical. But it is 100% possible for you to use the fertility awareness method while breastfeeding or not breastfeeding in your postpartum period after you've had a baby.
And similarly for irregular cycles, because that's another one that people often say, you can't use fertility awareness method for. But even if your cycle is irregular, again, you will still have the physical signs of ovulation. So if it's irregular, I would say that's even more of an invitation to track that feedback from your body. But it is still possible with irregular cycles to identify when you are fertile.
Yeah, and I honestly think more beneficial to do so, because then you can figure out, why is my cycle irregular? Am I ovulating? Am I not ovulating? Am I ovulating late in my cycle? Is my luteal phase short? This is all the information your cycle can give you. And also, by the way, in our course, there's a discussion that Jacqui and I do where we cover different variations of what you may see in your cycle and what that information may be telling you, and what you can possibly do about that information. So I think all the more reason to track is if you do have an irregular cycle. So now that we've covered that the fertility awareness method works and it can work wherever you are, there was a lot in that Times article that really didn't sit well with me. It really downplayed why women are moving away from the pill, because it cites that there's been a decrease in women taking hormonal contraceptive, and it blames the wellness industry for that. But it does cite that one of the most expressed concerns that people had was their mental well-being, and that the pill was potentially impacting on depression and anxiety. And it's very sad for me that this is downplayed as just, it's more important for somebody to avoid pregnancy and be on the pill than to listen to their concerns about their well-being in terms of depression and anxiety, and that doctors aren't listening to women with that, and they aren't giving them the full scope of what is known and not known about it, because that's often downplayed. Like, no, we don't actually know if it does impact on it, or it does, but only like a little bit. So don't worry too much about it. But if you listen to women, if you speak to women, you will hear that their experience is that during their time on the pill, their libido tanked, their anxiety went up, their depression went up. And we know that women are leaving hormonal birth control not because of the wellness influence per se, in my opinion, but more because they're experiencing something and people aren't listening to them.
And I think that the way she sort of talks about, wellness influences, I think, again, we have to realize that most wellness influences have come from a place of experience. They've come from a place of personally, maybe struggling with mental health challenges on the pill, or other issues. And I, in my experience, most of these wellness sort of influencers are really passionate about empowering women. That's how I feel that the sort of women's wellness trend has really taken off. And she talks about in the article, women are now getting their health information from social media, and, sort of the risks associated with that. And again, I think that women wouldn't need to get health information from social media if these legitimate forms of birth control were laid out to them in a medical setting. So again, I just wish that we weren't trying to create this divide between, medical and wellness. It should be a collaborative effort to empower women.
Just a quick side note is my best friend was telling me that she was talking to a woman that she knew who had PCOS, and the gynecologist was putting her on the birth control pill to help her fall pregnant. And the gynecologist had said that she was putting her on the strongest birth control there was. Like it was like, I don't know, an intense birth control. And my best friend had been on antidepressants for 10 years. She's been offered for about 10 years now, but from like 16 to 25, she was on antidepressants. And she asked this girl, "Oh, what pill were you on?" The girl told her. And my best friend's jaw just nearly hit the floor because she realized that's what she was put on for 10 years without even realizing this was the most intense or the most extreme one. And it correlated exactly with the times that she needed to be on antidepressants. There's just an interesting thing with this whole medical industry. It's like, here's one drug and then here's another one for what that drug does. And it's like, it's constantly, and then you get gaslit because you're telling medical professionals that you have a challenge or mental health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, some doctors might counter that to say, they don't use those high hormone forms of birth control anymore. They tend to use the ones with much less hormones in them. But for myself, when I went to my doctor and said I was struggling with a lot of anxiety on the pill, she put me on the lightest form of birth control, the lowest hormone form of birth control. And I still was not feeling like myself. And I really didn't enjoy the experience of being on it. And that's what led me personally to come off of it. So even on the lightest form of hormonal intervention, there can still be an influence on your mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I happened to be looking into when I was reading that article is I was just curious what the current stat is of people who are experiencing issues with anxiety and or depression who are on the pill. So I'm just gonna grab it up here because I just typed it into AI to get like the quickest sort of view of it. So there aren't any like super recent numbers to offer, but even from a study done in 2016, in adolescents, when they're using the combined pill, so that means estrogen and progesterone in the pill, that was linked to an 80% increase in the prescribed antidepressants and being diagnosed with depression. So that means teenagers between age 15 and 19, 80% increase. Obviously, this is a correlation thing, not a causation thing. But still, isn't that incredibly alarming? Because that's when most people are being put on the pill. And that's when we are at such a vulnerable point in our life, is the transition from child to teenager, from teenager to adult. And here we're being given something where people rightfully have concerns about whether it's going to impact their well-being. And then you have a doctor and a president of whatever she was the president of downplaying these concerns. Like whether somebody chooses to go on the pill or not, that's something different, but don't downplay those concerns. Those are legit concerns.
Another thing that she talks about in the article, which I think is potentially the topic for another talk that we can do, is she says, a lot of people, including health professionals, just don't understand that there are other uses for hormonal contraception apart from contraception. And she says this includes acne, PMS, heavy and painful periods. And my view is that going on the pill to mask those symptoms is actually quite detrimental, because at some point you're going to come off the pill if you want to fall pregnant, and those symptoms are all going to come back.
In most cases.
And come back probably worse. So I think that masking those symptoms we have to understand that masking the symptoms is not solving the symptoms. And actually having those symptoms is your body's way of communicating with you, giving you clues that it needs support, it needs nutritional or lifestyle support. And then we can actually learn how to support our body and see the changes in our cycle. Our cycle is like a feedback system that our body gives us to tell us, the state of our overall health. So I think that, saying that it has other benefits besides contraception is just not an accurate statement.
And I think what's worth doing is you don't have to take our word for it, because I actually asked my gynecologist this when I went there for my severe PMS, which included mood swings as my complaints. When he told me that the pill would fix it, I asked him point blank, will it fix it or will it mask my symptoms? But I will still be experiencing the underlying issue that is causing this. And he said, no, well, yeah, it will just be masking those symptoms, but at least you won't be experiencing them. And I said, yeah, but then I'm also not fixing what is happening because something is amiss here. And he's like, no, this just sometimes happens to people, and there's nothing that you can do about this. And I just want to say there was something I did about it, and I don't experience those symptoms anymore. So there's a lot of women who can share that information, and you can go check whether the hormonal birth control actually cures whatever symptom it is that a woman is experiencing, or whether it just masks it for a period of time, and then obviously we're disrupting the body in that. But that is a discussion that we can have more on another day, because for this discussion, I think we really just wanted to share that there is an alternative and that the fertility awareness method works, and it is incredibly effective, and its ineffectiveness is in your hands, and you're empowered with that information. And while there might be a little bit of learning to it, that learning is incredibly valuable. So yeah, once again, just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Our course is linked down below, as well as other resources that you can check out. And please remember to comment and let us know what else you would like us to discuss, or if you have any questions.